Welcome back, class 9 to the online bio classes. We were already doing chapter 4, pollination and fertilization. So we had studied about the two different types of pollination in the previous class, that is self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination we studied again two types, that is autogamy and geitonogamy. Autogamy means when pollination occurs within a single flower, whereas geitonogamy means transfer of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to stigma of another flower born on the same plant. Both the flowers were born on the same plant in geitonogamy. Whereas cross-pollination means the pollination between two flowers on two different plants. Okay, so today we have to study about nature favors cross-pollination. Nature also like or say that cross-pollination is better. How? Because nature wants the plant to be strong, to be healthy, and in order to grow the healthy plants, cross-pollination is the better or suitable method. Now, for the process of cross-pollination, you know that an agent is required to transfer the pollen grains from one flower to the other, and that agent may be of two types, that is biotic and abiotic agent. Biotic means the living agent, which includes different types of insects, animals, and abiotic agents are the non-living things which help in the transfer of pollen grains, that include wind, water. Okay, now one by one we'll study entomophily. The word entomophily means pollination by insects. Okay, I will just say the characteristics fast. Entomophily means pollination by insects. Now such flowers in which pollination is done by insect, you know that insects visit the flower for the purpose of getting the nectar, that is their food, and they are attracted by the brightly colored flowers as well as their scent. But their main purpose is to get the food by taking the nectar which is produced at the base of the petals. And such flowers, that is insect pollinated flowers, are called entomophilous flowers. So what are some of the characters which are listed in your book? Also you have to learn some characters of entomophilous flowers. Number one, the flowers are brightly colored and showy. They are large also. Number two, they produce such pollen grains which are sticky. So brightly colored flowers, like this you can write. Brightly colored flowers, they produce sticky pollen grains. Why the pollen grains are sticky? So that they can stick to the body of insects and they get transferred from one flower to the other when the insect will visit another flower. Then the third characteristics you can say, they produce scent and nectar. They produce scent. They also produce the nectar at the base of the petals. Apart from that, insect pollinated flowers, they are sticky or spinous. Already I said the stigma of the flower is also sticky. The stigma is sticky. Why stigma is sticky? Because it can help the pollens to attach to it. Okay. Now next we have to study pollination in sweet pea. Sweet pea is a type of protandrous flower. Protandrous means in which the male part matures, that is the anther matures before the stigma, that is the female part. And whenever the insect visits a pea flower to get the nectar, at that time, as soon as like two types of petals are there, one is called standard petal, the other one is called keel petals. So whenever insect visit the flower in search of nectar and lands on the wing petals, then it pulls down the keel petals, because both of them are in such an interlocking position that whenever insect will sit here, okay, this one will be pulled down, and when this anther will be pulled down, the pollens will stick to its body. Okay, the style and stigma come out touching the under surface of the bee, that is the back side of the bee, that may be carrying the pollens from another flower. So pollens are already there. This stigma, so the stigma will come in contact with the back of the insect, and it will carry the pollens from there to the stigma, because it is arranged in a lever-like mechanism. Okay, so it means when the insect sits on one of the petals, the stigma is pulled down due to lever-like mechanism, and this stigma comes in contact with the backside of the insect and picks up the pollen grains, and that will cause the pollination process. Okay, now next one is ornithophilia. Pollination by birds is called ornithophilia. So if the word is ornithophilia means pollination by birds. Okay, so pollinating agent is the bird, which is also a biotic agent. Certain birds like hummingbird, they have a very long and pointed needle-like beak. Why? Because they have to reach up to the nectar of the flower, which is in the form of a tube-like structure. So their beak is also pointed because hummingbird will come in search of nectar in the flower. And if their beak is of different shape, so there is the differences in the shape of the flower, which are pollinated by bats. Flowers pollinated by birds to accommodate their beaks. Okay, so pollination by birds is called ornithophilia. Hummingbird is the example. Now this one, bird pollinated flowers has certain characteristics or adaptations. How the flowers change or modify themselves. Number one, the flowers are often large and brightly colored. Large and brightly colored. Why? To attract the birds. Because if the flowers are not big in size, they are not colorful, then the birds will not get attracted. Number two, the petals are fused into a tube-like structure. Petals fused to form a tube-like structure so that the bird's beak can enter inside that tube in order to get the nectar, and the flowers usually have projecting stamens and stigmas. So stamens and stigmas are projecting. Stamens, that is the male part, and stigma, that is the female part, are projecting, means they are placed outward so that they can come in contact with the body of the birds to bring about the pollination. An example of such flower which are pollinated by birds are hibiscus, that is China rose, and Erythrenia, passiflora, canna, begonia, etc. Now next we have pollination by bat, that is another living agent. So bat pollinated flowers are also called chiropterophilia, the word which is used to describe pollination by birds. It is called chiropterophilia. Okay, what is the word used? Chiropterophilia, pollination by bats. Chiropterophilia means pollination by bats. You know that bats are nocturnal animals. They are active only at night. In the daytime, they are found inactive. So those flowers which are pollinated by the bats, they show certain characteristics or changes. Example, the flowers are producing the nectar. They are brightly colored. Number two, these flowers open at night only, because if such flowers will not open at night, they remain closed at night, then they may not attract the bats for causing pollination. Okay, so pollination by bats is found in tropical region because bats visit the flower to suck nectar or either to get the pollen grains to chew them or get their food. And the characteristics are flowers in large in size and they have large pedicel. Large flowers and large pedicels. Pedicels, you know, the stalk of the flower is bigger. Then they open at night. The flowers will open at night because bats are nocturnal in habitat. They become active at night. That's why such flowers should open at night only. And these flowers produce a large amount of nectar. Produce a large amount of nectar, which is the food for the bats. Okay, large amount of nectar. So these only three characteristics are there. of bad pollinated flowers, which are also called Chiropterophily. And examples are Kygella africana and Anthocephalus. Two examples are there, so you can learn both the examples name. It is there in your book also. Now next is wind pollinated flower, which is also called Anemophilus. Anemophilus means pollination by wind. The word anemia stands for wind. So pollination by wind is called Anemophilus. So such flowers which are pollinated by wind, they show certain characteristics, like number one, the pollens are light. Pollens are light means their weight is very less, dry and powder-like, which can be scattered by the wind. Number two, pollens are produced in large quantity. Okay, because most of the pollens are carried by the wind and they are deposited in those places which are not suitable for them to bring about pollination. So pollens are produced in large quantity, in plenty of quantities. And third one, the pollens which are produced, which are like carried by wind, these pollens may not land on a particular species of the flower, so those pollens will be wastage. So plenty of wastage of pollen grains is there during this process. It is not economical process. And next one is the flowers are small and they lack bright colors, because winds will not get attracted by the color of the flowers. So flowers are small and lack colors. Bright colors is not there. Then some more are there. They do not produce scent and nectar. Why? Because the wind will not get attracted by the scent of the flower, or they will not get attracted towards the flower to get their food or the nectar. And sometimes the pollens are small, light, smooth, dry and powdery. Now next one, the stigmas are large and protruding. This is an important character. Protruding means hanging outward. The stigma should be coming outside and hanging from the flower. Okay, so that also you can write protruding. Stigma means stigma which is projected outward. Why? Because if the stigma is placed outside the flower, when the wind will blow, it will deposit the pollen grains on such stigma which is visible or which is externally available to them. If it is placed inside the flower, it may not be suitable for the winds to deposit the pollens on the right place. Now next we have pollination in maize. You may have seen a maize plant. At the top of the maize flowers are there. Then we have the leaves, okay, the long leaves of maize plant is there. Then you can see the cobs which are there. Cobs, you know, the one in which we eat, the grains are present. And then we have the silky hair-like structures. They represent the style. And this one, the tassels, represent the male flower, that is the stamens. So when the wind will blow, the pollens will get deposited from the male part to the female part of the flower. So it is the wind which brings about pollination. This is the style, the hair-like structure which is coming outside from the cob, the one which we eat, isn't it? Inside. So that hair-like structure is the style, the female part. And this one on the top is the male part of the flower, that is the male inflorescence, which produces the pollens. So pollens will get deposited from the male part to the female part due to wind. And this is an example of wind pollination. Now next is differences between wind pollination and insect pollinated flowers. What are the differences? Can you count? Number one, insect pollinated flowers are brightly colored, but wind pollinated flowers are not brightly colored. Insect pollinated flowers produce nectar. Wind pollinated flowers do not produce nectar. Insect pollinated flowers are sticky or spinous. They have spine-like structures so that they can stick to the surface of the insect's body. But in case of wind pollinated flowers, the pollen grains are light, small and dry, powdery-like. Means they do not have any spinous outgrowth, because they do not have to attach to the body of insects. Then next you can write, in insect pollinated flower, the stigma is sticky, whereas in wind pollinated flower, the stigma is protruding, that is hanging outward. Okay, then you can write insect pollinated flower do not produce plenty of pollen grains, whereas in wind pollinated flowers plenty or large quantity of pollen grains are produced so that they can be carried from one place to the other, because most of the pollens are wasted while being carried by the wind from one place to the other. Now last one is hydrophily or pollination by water. You know that because some flowers are found growing in water, some plants do grow in water, they are aquatic plants. So in those plants that grow in water, pollination is done by, or it is the pollen grains are transferred with the help of water current. And such type of pollination which is achieved with the help of water current is called pollination by water, and the word which is used is hydrophily. Okay, what is hydrophily? It is pollination. Hydro means water, so it is pollination by water. Pollination by water is called hydrophily. Alright. Now, example you can write Vallisneria, and then we'll study the characteristics of such flowers, such wind water pollinated flowers. Number one, Vallisneria, they produce large number of pollen grains. The two characteristics of hydrophilous flowers are large number of pollen grains. Okay, they produce large number of pollens. And the second characteristics, the pollens are waterproof because they have to swim on the surface of water, so they have got a waterproof coating on their body, so pollen grains keep on floating alongside the surface of water. It means they have the power of floating, so pollens can float on the surface of water. Buoyancy is there, no floating power is there. Okay, now one example is there, Vallisneria. In Vallisneria, the male flowers are short, like these are the male flowers, they are short. Female flowers are long, they have the long stalks or styles. So female flowers will send their female, that is stigma, on the surface of the water. This is the surface of the water. So female flowers will be floating on the surface, whereas male flowers being small, they will release the pollen grains or the anthers, and the anthers will go and it will swim on the surface of water, and they will come in contact with the female part, that is the stigma, and once the pollination is achieved, this stigma will be rolled back. Means the stigma is spiral in nature, so it will pull back its stalk. Okay, so this type of pollination is achieved in Vallisneria, the male flowers being small in height and the female flowers being long, they have the long stalk. So we have completed this one. Now next topic we have to do is fertilization, steps in fertilization, double fertilization and fruit and seed. Okay, okay, the next topic we have to do is fertilization. What is fertilization? You know, fertilization is the fusion of male and female gametes. That is, in case of flower, it is the fusion of male gamete is the pollens, and the female gamete is the egg cell to form a zygote is called fertilization. Okay, and now in angiosperms, the female gametophyte is located deep inside the ovary, which is quite away from the stigma. So if you look at the diagram, I will just draw the diagram. This is the stigma part I will draw here. Okay, then we have long stalk called style, and finally we have a swollen ovary. Okay, inside the ovary you will find the embryo sac is present, and this embryo sac contains different types of cells. So in the middle we have polar nuclei, then here we have the egg cell and two synergids. I will draw this diagram bigger here. This is one of the embryo sac. Okay, here we have the I made it so big, female egg cell is there, and these two cells which are present, they are called synergids. What are they called? Synergids. DS. This one is called egg cell. Okay. In the middle we have, this is called secondary nucleus or polar nuclei. In your book you can see what is the word written. Polar nucleus. Can you not get that word? Polar nucleus, which is present in the center. Then here we have the antipodal cells. 1, 2, 3 cells are there. They are called, all three together, they are known as antipodal cells. Antipodal cells. Okay. Now they have a covering around it like this. Here you can see one covering is there. You can see that. This is called synergids. They have the covering called integument. Outer integument, inner integument is there. But this one you see, that is called embryo sac. Embryo sac. Okay. This is the diagram of embryo sac which I have drawn. It is present inside the ovary, and the ovary contains ovule, and inside the ovule we have the structure that is the embryo sac. Okay. Now what you have to study is what are the steps in fertilization. So what diagram is there? Figure 4.8, A, B, C, D. You can draw these diagrams. It is good for you. What are the different steps of fertilization? The first step is, number 1, germination of pollen grains. You know that pollen grains are deposited on the stigma. This is the stigma part of the flower. Okay. So these pollen grains, now I have to rub it. If you see one of the pollen grain, see what is the structure of pollen grains. I will try to draw it. A pollen grain consists of two types of nuclei. One of the nucleus is called vegetative nucleus. The other one is called generative nucleus. So one is tube nucleus written. The other one is known as, what is the name given? Generative nucleus. Generative nucleus. And this one is called tube nucleus. Okay. Tube nucleus is the one which will germinate and it will form a long pollen tube. Okay. So suppose this is the pollen grain, it will germinate and it will form a long pollen tube like this. And this pollen tube, at the tip, it will contain this tube nucleus, whereas the generative cell, the function of tube nucleus is it will help in the formation of this pollen tube. And the function of generative nucleus, the second nucleus, it is there to form the two male gametes. It is behind it. Okay. And then you will find that there are certain covering around it. The outer cover is called exine and the inner one is called intine. So this is the intine layer. Then outer layer, I will draw it like this. I didn't get sufficient place. I will draw it again here. Rub it and draw. Okay, the structure of pollen grain is required. You must draw it nicely. Like this you draw. Then you draw both the nucleus. Name one of the nucleus as tube nucleus. What is this diagram of? Structure of pollen grain. This one is generative nucleus. Alright. Then it has outermost covering like this. And then okay, you can see certain gaps are there. This is called germ pore. Germ pore, P-O-R-E, pore. And this outer layer, it is called exine. And the inner layer, this one is there, it is called intine. So what is exine and intine? They are the protective covering which are present around the pollen grains. Okay. So what is the function of this germ pore? It is the place through which this tube will germinate. The pollen tube will germinate. Okay. Now next is tube nucleus. What is micropyle? Micropyle is a tiny pore, like here I had drawn the diagram just now. The tiny pore through which pollen tube enters inside the embryo sac. Suppose it enters from here, it will germinate, okay, and it will enter from this particular part. So this part from where the pollen tube enters inside the embryo sac is called micropyle. Okay. So micropyle is that part from where the pollen tube will enter inside the embryo sac. Now next is entry of pollen tube into the ovule. First the pollen tube will enter inside the ovule, then it will enter inside the embryo sac, and after getting entry inside the embryo sac, the pollen tube, it will, now this tube nucleus has no function, so it will degenerate and it will release both the male gametes inside the embryo sac. One of the male gamete will fuse, like this is the male gamete, it will fuse with the secondary nucleus. The other male gamete will fuse with the egg cell, so this is the second male gamete. So because 2 times fertilization is caused, it is called double fertilization. Got it? Like one fertilization between secondary nucleus and the male gamete. The second fertilization is between the egg cell and the male gamete. 2 male gametes are produced by the division of which one? By the division of this generative nucleus. Alright? And why it is called triple fusion? This is asked, what is the meaning of double fertilization and triple fusion? Because this cell is already diploid. Because it is formed by the fusion of 2 polar nuclei. Polar nuclei are there in the center. Here 2 polar nuclei are there. N plus N. So it is already 2N diploid. And plus this N, that is the male gamete, is fused. So now it becomes triple fusion. It is called 3N. So why double fertilization? Because 2 times fertilization occurs. And why triple fusion? Because the secondary nucleus fertilizes with the haploid male gamete to form triploid endosperm nucleus. Got it? So due to the fusion of secondary nucleus with the male gamete, what is formed? Answer is endosperm is formed. And due to the fusion of male gamete with the egg cell, what is formed? Zygote is formed. Okay, and this zygote later on develops to form the fruit, and inside the fruit is seed is developed. Okay. So now next, what we have to do is double fertilization and triple fusion. Already I said. Now, what are the different parts of the flower and in which the changes occurs? That is called post-fertilization changes. Like after fertilization, the wall of the ovary, this one ovary I said, it will change into the wall of the fruit. Then number 2, ovary will change into the fruit. The entire ovary will develop into fruit. Ovule will change into seed, and the funicle will change into stalk. What is funicle? The stalk of the ovule is called funicle. You can see in the diagram. Hilum will remain the hilum. Micropyle will remain the micropyle only. Integuments, which I said here, exine and intine, they will develop into testa and tegmen. What is testa and tegmen? If you have a seed, the outermost layer is called testa, inner layer of seed coat is called tegmen. So this testa develops from exine, tegmen develops from intine. Okay, after fertilization. Then next we have the egg cell develops into embryo, means when both of them will fertilize, they will form zygote. Zygote will undergo division and form the embryo, and the embryo will contain the baby plant in the form of radicle and plumule. Then last one is secondary nucleus. This secondary nucleus will develop into endosperm. Alright, so this one also you can learn. Now next one is fruit and seed. You know what is parthenocarpic fruit. Generally fruits are formed after fertilization, but sometimes some fruits are formed even without fertilization. Such fruits are called parthenocarpic fruits, and they do not produce any seeds, like banana. You can give example. Then next one is, there are 2 types of fruits. What is the definition of fruit? We can say fruit is a mature or ripened ovary which contains seed inside it. Alright? And what is seed? A mature ovule is called seed. And inside the seed we have the embryo or the baby plant, which contains plumule that gives rise to the shoot system, and the radicle that produces the root system. Now we have 2 types of fruits are there. 2 types of fruits. What are they? True and false fruits. What is the meaning of true fruits? All those fruits which develop generally from the ovary of the flower is called true fruits, like mango, guava, all are true fruits. But apple is a false fruit. Why? Because if a fruit develops from any other part of the flower except the ovary, like if it develops from the thalamus or receptacle, or if it develops from the calyx, such fruits which develop from any other part of the flower except the ovary is called false fruit. Example is apple, already I said. Now, a fruit consists of two parts. What are they? Number one is pericarp and the second one is seed. Pericarp is further differentiated into three layers: epicarp, mesocarp, endocarp. The outermost layer of the fruit is called epicarp. The middle fleshy or pulpy layer which we eat is called the mesocarp, like the edible part of the mango, that is mesocarp. The outermost cover which we remove, that is epicarp. And the inner hard part which contains the seed is the endocarp. Then next we have the seed. After fertilization, the ovule develops into seed, and the seed is made up of seed coat and embryo. So what is seed coat? The outermost protective covering of the seed is called seed coat. It consists of two layers. The outer hard protective covering is called testa, and the inner soft layer is called tegmen. And the embryo is the baby plant which contains the plumule which gives rise to the shoot system, the radicle which gives rise to the root system. Now, depending upon the number of cotyledons, cotyledons means the one which store food inside the seeds. Like if you see the bean seed, there are two cotyledons. The function of cotyledons is to store food. So if a seed contains a single cotyledon, it is called monocot. If it has two cotyledons, like in beans, rajma and all, that is called dicotyledons. Now, last topic is significance of seeds and fruits. What is the importance of seeds and fruits? Number one, they provide food to the animals which are living on the ground when they are dispersed from one place to the other. Number two, they produce new plants because you can grow or germinate a new plant by growing seeds inside the soil. And fruits provide source of energy to the animals who feed on them. Lot of vitamins, minerals are found in the fruits. Apart from that, some seeds like wheat, maize, rice, they are the staple food of human beings, means they are the main food of human beings. We depend on them to get our nutrients. Some fruits provide nutrients for human beings, and seeds also, they are important reservoir, or they are the important food resource for all the forest floor animals, means the animals which are found dwelling on the ground. They eat the fruits and seeds which are dispersed by the animals while feeding on them. So you can say seed is the future plant also, because it contains the baby plant inside it. So we have completed this chapter. Now you can try the exercises, and in the next class we can continue with the next chapter, that is chapter 5, structure and germination of seeds. Till then you can try all the question answers. Thank you.